Let's start with Mad Max. So, I recently had the chance to spend some time with Mad Max, and let me tell you, it's an experience that truly stands out. The game captures the raw, gritty essence of the Mad Max universe so well that it feels like you're right in the heart of that post-apocalyptic wasteland. One of the first things that hit me was the attention to detail in the environment. The desolate landscapes and towering sandstorms are crafted with such precision that they almost feel alive. It's like every corner of the world has a story to tell, and exploring it becomes an adventure in itself. Upgrading and customizing your car, the magnum opus, is an absolute blast. There's something incredibly satisfying about tearing through enemies with a fully upgraded, heavily armed vehicle. And the thrill of high-speed chases and explosive battles really keeps you on the edge of your seat. The narrative is another strong point. Max's journey, filled with intense personal struggles and high-stakes encounters, is engaging from start to finish. It's not just about surviving, it's about finding purpose in a world that's gone mad. The characters you meet along the way, each with their own quirks and backstories, add depth to the story. What's more, the game does a great job of balancing action with exploration. There's always something to discover, whether it's hidden loot, side quests, or just interesting details in the environment. It encourages you to take your time and really soak in the world around you. The combat mechanics are solid. Next we have Sleeping Dogs Definitive Edition. This game is seriously underrated and deserves way more love. Imagine an open-world action game set in the bustling streets of Hong Kong, where you play as an undercover cop tangled up in the city's dangerous criminal underworld. It's like GTA, but with a unique twist that really sets it apart. And let's not forget the driving. Sleeping Dogs has some of the most fun driving mechanics out there. It's super arcadey, and you can do crazy stunts, hijack cars on the go, and even ram other cars off the road. There's something so satisfying about zooming through the city, dodging traffic, and knowing you can hop out at any time to start a fistfight. The city is alive with neon lights, crowded markets, and tons of little side activities that make it feel so authentic. You can go sing karaoke. Yes, karaoke. Try your luck at street races, or just cruise around and soak in the atmosphere. The developers did a fantastic job capturing the vibe of Hong Kong, and it's a city you actually want to explore. One of the best parts of Sleeping Dogs is the hand-to-hand combat. It's like a martial arts movie come to life. You're throwing punches, countering moves, and using your environment in the coolest ways. You can slam enemies into fish tanks, toss them off balconies, and even use random objects around you to gain the upper hand. So, if you're into action games with a great story and a city that feels alive and vibrant, Sleeping Dogs Definitive Edition is absolutely worth checking out. Next we have Days Gone. I'll admit, when I first heard about it, I wasn't expecting too much, but once I started playing, I got hooked. It's one of those open-world games where you get so lost in the world that hours just fly by. And let's be real, who doesn't love a good post-apocalyptic story with zombies? Or I guess freakers in this case. The thing that stands out to me the most is the world itself. Oregon, but post-apocalyptic. It's both beautiful and terrifying at the same time. You're riding your bike through these gorgeous landscapes, like snow-capped mountains and dense forests, but you know danger is lurking around every corner. It's such a cool mix of peaceful and intense. I remember just cruising down the highway at sunset, only to get ambushed by a freaker horde or a pack of wolves out of nowhere. Speaking of the bike, Days Gone really makes it feel like your best friend. I know it sounds weird, but you're constantly upgrading it, maintaining it, and using it to get out of some really tight spots. Running out of gas in the middle of nowhere, with freakers closing in, is one of those moments where you're like, okay, this is serious. But when you've got your bike tuned up and ready to go, it's an absolute blast to just ride through the wilderness, wind in your hair, dodging obstacles and escaping enemies. And then there's Deacon. I didn't expect to get so attached to his story, but as the game went on, I really started to feel for the guy. The freaker hordes, though, insane. The first time you run into one, it's pure panic. I'm talking hundreds of freakers coming at you all at once, and you have to figure out how to take them down, or just run for your life. Next we have Watch Dogs. You remember Watch Dogs? The first one? I feel like it doesn't get enough love. It's funny because when it first came out, everyone was hyped about the whole hacking thing. Yeah, it didn't fully live up to the insane expectations, but looking back, it was actually a pretty solid game. What really pulled me in was the whole idea of controlling the city with your phone. Like, you could hack traffic lights, cameras, basically turning the entire city of Chicago into your personal playground. There's just something so satisfying about sneaking into an enemy base and never even having to fire a shot. Just using cameras and distractions to mess with people. It made me feel like this tech-savvy mastermind. Aiden Pierce is a little brooding, and not the most charismatic character out there, but I kinda liked that about him. He felt like this guy driven by grief, and everything he did had this personal weight to it. I also loved how the city of Chicago itself felt alive. It's not just a backdrop, it reacts to what you're doing. If you cause too much chaos, people call the cops. And then you've got this whole cat-and-mouse chase through the streets, dodging police cars and helicopters. I had so many moments where I barely escaped by hacking a drawbridge or raising blockers just in time. The adrenaline rush from those moments was legit. I think it's one of those games that's way better than people remember. It had a fresh take on open-world action, with the whole hacking twist that really made it stand out. If you haven't played it in a while, I'd say give it another shot. It's got this cool, techie, modern, vigilante vibe. Next, we have Plague Tale Innocence. This is one of those games that really sticks with you long after you put down the controller. Have you ever started a game and almost immediately felt transported into a different world? That's what this game does. It's not just about the mechanics or the graphics. It's the story and the atmosphere that completely pull you in. Set during the 14th century, the game centers around a young girl, Amicia, and her little brother Hugo. From the start, you feel this sense of urgency, danger, and dread. I think what makes it special is the bond between the siblings. It's emotional. You genuinely feel Amicia's protective instinct for her brother, and it brings out this unique side of gameplay, where it's not just about survival, but about care and responsibility. The world itself is both beautiful and horrifying at the same time. I mean, yes, it's grim, the plague is spreading, the Inquisition is ruthless, and rats are everywhere. Seriously, if you hate rats, this game will challenge that. But the art direction is so stunning. I'd find myself just pausing to admire a landscape or the light filtering through a ruined building, even though I knew danger was everywhere. It's these little moments of beauty that make the darker, scarier elements hit even harder. What I found refreshing about Plague Tale is how it combines puzzle solving, stealth, and storytelling so seamlessly. You're not just mindlessly fighting enemies. Instead, you're constantly thinking, strategizing, and using your environment to your advantage. Next we have Doom Eternal, a game that's just pure adrenaline. From the moment you start, it's like the game grabs you by the collar and throws you into this insane, demon-filled chaos. The pacing is so fast and relentless, it makes you feel like this unstoppable force. You're not just playing as the Doomslayer, you are the Doomslayer, and it's awesome. One thing I love about Doom Eternal is how it forces you to play aggressively. You can't just hide behind cover and pick off enemies from a distance like in other shooters. No way. You have to get in their faces, constantly moving, switching weapons, and using your chainsaw to keep your ammo up. It's this perfect mix of strategy and brutality. There's no time to breathe. And honestly, that's what makes it so much fun. Every fight feels like a frantic dance of destruction, and once you get the rhythm down, it's such a rush. The combat loop is where it really shines. You're always juggling resources, health, armor, ammo, and you get those by fighting. Need health? Glory kill a demon. Low on armor? Set enemies on fire with the flame belch. It's a constant back and forth, and it makes every encounter feel dynamic. You never just shoot your way through a room, you're managing the chaos, and that's what makes it so addicting. And the weapons, man. Each one feels so satisfying. The shotgun, the plasma rifle, the BFG. It's all there, and it's all beefed up to feel more powerful than ever. Doom Eternal is an absolute must-play. It's intense, it's challenging, and it's just pure, unfiltered fun. Next we have Resident Evil 3 Remake. Definitely one of those games that's way better than people give it credit for. Seriously, if you haven't given it a shot, or maybe dismissed it because it's shorter than other Resident Evil games, you're missing out. It's packed with intense moments, killer gameplay, and one of the most relentless enemies in the series. You've got Jill Valentine, who is such a badass, going through Raccoon City as it just falls apart. The whole city is basically on fire, zombies everywhere. And then you've got Nemesis. My God, Nemesis. That thing is relentless. Every time you hear him coming, that music kicks in, and it's like your heart rate just skyrockets. You think Mr. X from Resident Evil 2 was bad? this guy's next level. The thing I love about RE3 Remake is how fast-paced it is compared to some other Resident Evil games. It's way more action-heavy, and Jill feels like she's always moving, always surviving on the edge. The balance between survival and action is super well done. And there's still that classic Resident Evil inventory management, where you have to decide like, do I take more health or more ammo? I love that dilemma, because it makes every decision feel critical, especially when you've got Nemesis chasing you. And speaking of that, the combat in this game feels tight. It's satisfying when you nail those perfect dodges, and then counterattack. The dodge mechanic is probably one of the things that makes Jill feel so agile compared to Leon or Claire in RE2. You really feel like you're evolving with the gameplay as you get better at dodging zombies. Next we have Assassin's Creed Unity. I know it got some heat when it first came out, but these days it's actually kind of a hidden gem. Paris during the French Revolution is just incredible. The city feels so alive with all the chaos of that time period. People rioting in the streets, vendors yelling, revolutionaries everywhere. You really feel like you're in the middle of it all. What I love most about Unity is the detail in the city. The way they've recreated Notre Dame and all the landmarks is just breathtaking. I mean, it's Paris. Who wouldn't want to explore every nook and cranny? Arno, the main character, gives off that classic Assassin's Creed vibe, but he's a bit more relatable. He's got this personal revenge story going on, which feels pretty typical for AC, but with the revolution happening around him, it adds a lot more tension. And the whole romance thing with Elise, I thought it was a nice touch, gave the story more depth. And let's talk parkour. The parkour in Unity is easily the best in the series. It just feels so smooth. Running through the narrow streets, climbing up buildings, it's like you can feel every jump and movement. Escaping guards or just free running across rooftops never gets old. The customization is a major highlight too. You can kit Arno out with different outfits, weapons, and abilities. Whether you want to go full stealth or just dive into combat, it's totally up to you. The freedom to shape how you play is awesome. Oh, and the co-op missions. I had so much fun with those. Running heists with friends, trying to coordinate attacks. It's pure chaos in the best way. Nothing goes to plan, but it's hilarious when it doesn't. Next we have Cyberpunk 2077. I know it had a rocky start, but seriously, it's a totally different game now after all the updates. The world of Night City is just wow. I mean, if you love getting lost in a huge, neon-lit, gritty open world, this game is perfect. It feels alive, you know? The city's got this cyberpunk vibe down to a T. Dark alleys, giant holograms, futuristic cars, the whole Blade Runner kind of thing. And honestly, I love how the game doesn't shy away from showing the messier side of that world, like the clash of high-tech and low-life. V, the main character, is super customizable too. I spent way too much time tweaking my character at the start, like more than I'd care to admit. But it's fun to play with all the different builds, whether you want to go full-on hacker, cybernetic brawler, or sneaky assassin. Plus, the augmentations, dude, that's the coolest part. You can literally replace parts of your body with cybernetic enhancements. Who wouldn't want a built-in katana arm or optic implants? What's crazy is how the story can change depending on what you do. Like, the choices really feel like they matter. There was this one mission where I was trying to decide whether to help these corporate types or betray them, and man, I was stressing over it for days. I couldn't stop thinking, what if I made the wrong choice? But that's the fun of it. There's no right or wrong answer, just how you want to play it. I will say the driving can be a little wonky at times, but honestly, once you get used to it, it's not that bad. Plus, the city's so massive, it's fun just cruising around, taking in the sights. Next, we have Outer Wilds. This game is all about exploring the unknown, and it really leans into that feeling of pure discovery. You're a new astronaut, part of this tiny space program from a small, cozy alien race, and you're launched out into space with nothing but your ship and a lot of questions. And I mean a lot of questions. What's so cool about Outer Wilds is that it doesn't handhold or push you in any specific direction. You have this whole solar system to explore, and every single planet is like its own character. Each place is unique, with strange environments, hidden stories, and mysteries that just pull you in. You land somewhere, start exploring, and immediately find yourself getting wrapped up in something unexpected. The sense of wonder in this game is unreal. I mean, you'll be cruising along and suddenly you're uncovering secrets that are far bigger than you'd expect. There's something magical about wandering into these ancient ruins or discovering strange technologies from a long-lost civilization. And as you piece things together, you start to understand that every single mystery is connected, which is honestly so satisfying. One of my favorite things is how much Outer Wilds makes you feel like a real explorer. There's no combat or big flashy objectives. It's all about curiosity. Every time you figure something out, it feels like a little victory, and the game respects that you're smart enough to connect the dots on your own. Another thing is the time loop. It's such a unique mechanic that gives the game this sense of urgency, but without being punishing. It's like you're reliving this amazing day over and over, trying to piece together everything. Next we have Death Stranding, one of the most divisive games out there. When this game dropped, it was like half the gaming community loved it, and the other half was just like, what is this? It's a Hideo Kojima game, so you know it was going to be unique. But Death Stranding took that to a whole new level. Instead of fast-paced action or combat-heavy gameplay, you're a delivery guy in a post-apocalyptic world. It's a game about walking, hiking, and, yes, carrying boxes. People were super confused by the whole concept, especially because the marketing was so mysterious. The trailers didn't really explain much, and when players realized they'd be spending a lot of time delivering packages across desolate landscapes, some were disappointed. It wasn't the action-packed game people expected from the creator of Metal Gear Solid. But here's where the game shines. Death Stranding isn't trying to be a traditional game. It's about the journey, the connections you make, and the feeling of isolation in a broken world. And if you get into that mindset, the game is really something special. It's strangely relaxing, even though it has some seriously intense moments. The way it handles the idea of connecting players, allowing you to help out others in the world by leaving equipment or building structures, was pretty innovative. It made the world feel shared, even though it's a single-player game. Sure, it's not for everyone. If you're looking for constant action, Death Stranding might not be your cup of tea, but if you're in the mood for something different, something that really takes its time to build atmosphere, it's a game that delivers a unique experience. Next, we have Atomic Heart. From the moment you jump into this weird, retro-futuristic Soviet world, you can tell you're in for something totally different. The whole vibe of the game is what grabbed me first. It's like if BioShock and Half-Life had this crazy alternate reality baby. The setting just pulls you in right away. Everything's all shiny and utopian on the surface, but you can feel this eerie tension creeping in. Like something's definitely not right here. The aesthetics? Absolutely stunning. It's got this whole 1950s retro sci-fi look, but it's set in this alternate version of the USSR where technology advanced in these weird, unsettling ways. Robots everywhere. And they're not your friendly, helpful kind either. As you're exploring, you've got this constant sense of, okay, when's the next crazy thing gonna try and kill me? It keeps you on edge, but in a fun way. Combat is intense, but super satisfying. You've got all these cool weapons, and then you mix in these crazy powers you can use with your left hand. It's like you're blasting enemies with a shotgun in one hand while using telekinesis or freezing them with your other hand. The mix of gunplay and abilities just feels so smooth and fluid. And let me tell you, when you finally master the combo system, you feel like a total badass. The enemies are really something too. You've got these creepy humanoid robots with weird, unsettling movements, and then there are the more bizarre, out there designs that look like something out of a fever dream. Every encounter feels different, because the enemies keep you on your toes. Next we have Kingdom Come Deliverance. It's not your typical medieval RPG, and that's exactly what makes it so special. When I first started, I was blown away by how grounded it feels. You're not some chosen one or knight in shining armor. You're just Henry, a blacksmith's son. And that's one of the best things about it. The game doesn't hold your hand, and it really throws you into this unforgiving world of Bohemia. It's gritty, realistic, and refreshingly different from other RPGs that lean into fantasy. The realism in this game is next level. There's no magic or dragons here. Everything is based on actual historical events, and the attention to detail is crazy. The armor, the weapons, the way people live. It's also authentic, and that extends to the gameplay too. The combat system, for example, is super unique. It's not just about button mashing your way through fights. It's tactical, slow-paced, and takes a lot of practice to get right. Sword fighting in particular feels so different from any other game. It's all about timing, positioning, and strategy. You really need to pay attention to how your opponent moves. What I love about Kingdom Come Deliverance is how immersive the world is. The landscape is stunning, and the towns and villages feel alive. You walk through the streets, and people are going about their daily routines. There's a sense that life continues, whether you're there or not. The historical accuracy is something else too. The game takes place during an actual period in history. You can tell they've poured so much effort into making everything feel as true to the time as possible. Next we have Dead Island 2. It's one of those games that after being in development for so long, you're just happy it finally exists. If you're into zombie games, this one is like a bloody sun-soaked vacation, where you can let loose and hack, slash, and smash your way through hordes of the undead. What's cool about it is that it doesn't take itself too seriously. The game knows exactly what it is, a fun, over-the-top zombie slasher set in sunny California. And sometimes that's exactly what you need. First off, the setting is great. Instead of a gloomy, post-apocalyptic wasteland, Dead Island 2 takes place in a colorful, almost absurdly beautiful version of Los Angeles. They call it Hell A, and the contrast between the bright, glamorous world of Hollywood and the grotesque, decaying zombies is just awesome. You're running through luxury mansions, beaches, and fancy neighborhoods, all while the city crumbles around you. It's like you're on a demented version of a sightseeing tour. The zombies themselves come in all shapes and sizes, and they're not pushovers. You've got your standard walkers, but there are also faster, more aggressive types, like runners and screamers who can call for reinforcements. Some are armored, others are on fire or covered in acid, and each type forces you to adjust your tactics. It keeps you on your toes and makes the combat feel fresh. You're constantly adapting and finding new ways to take them down, whether it's by using environmental traps, setting them on fire, or just going for headshots. Overall, Dead Island 2 is just a good time. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel, but it doesn't need to. Next we have The Order 1886. I know it got mixed reviews when it came out, but honestly I think it's super underrated. It's like every single thing from the cobblestone streets to the smoke-filled taverns feels alive. You can really see how much love went into building that world. The steampunk vibe is also really cool. You've got this mix of old-school Victorian aesthetic with futuristic tech, like those crazy weapons that Nikola Tesla himself designed. The thermite rifle, for example, is just so satisfying to use. You shoot clouds of thermite at enemies, and then light it up with a flare, setting everything ablaze. It's so over the top, but in the best way possible. And the story? It's actually pretty engaging. You're part of this ancient order of knights tasked with keeping the peace in London, but things get real complicated, especially with the introduction of half-breeds, like werewolves, and other supernatural threats. Plus, the way it blends history with fantasy, that was a fun twist for me. Sir Galahad, the main character, has this gruff, no-nonsense attitude that really pulls you into the whole mystery and intrigue of the game. I liked how he's conflicted, dealing with betrayal and questioning everything around him. It gave the game more emotional depth than I expected. The gunplay is solid too. It's not a massive open-world shooter, but for a more linear experience, the mechanics work great. Each weapon feels unique, and the cover system is smooth. And those cinematic quick-time events, I know some people aren't fans of QTEs, but here they blend so well with the action. It feels more like you're playing through a movie. Next we have Helldivers 2. Now, this game is a follow-up to the original Helldivers, which had a strong cult following. It's all about cooperative, top-down, tactical shooting, but with a pretty unique twist. It's brutally difficult. However, Helldivers 2 has gotten some hate for being too punishing, or for having gameplay mechanics that can feel overwhelming, especially for new players. One of the biggest complaints is how unforgiving it can be. Friendly fire is always on, which means you can accidentally or not so accidentally kill your teammates during missions. And believe me, this happens a lot. It's a game that forces you to be super careful, and not everyone is down for that level of intensity. The steep learning curve and lack of hand-holding also rubbed some players the wrong way, especially those who were expecting something more casual. Another thing that got some pushback was the game's structure. Missions can feel repetitive after a while, and if you're playing solo, the game is an entirely different experience, and not always in a good way. It's built around cooperative play, so going in alone can make it feel more frustrating than fun. But here's the thing. If you're into tactical shooters and have a squad to play with, Helldivers 2 is an absolute blast. The chaos that comes from trying to coordinate with your teammates while dodging enemy fire and calling in reinforcements makes for some seriously intense moments. The variety of weapons, gear, and strategies you can use makes each mission feel dynamic, and the constant threat of messing up keeps the tension high. Sure, it's tough, but that's also what makes it so satisfying. Next we have The Surge. I went into it thinking, okay, another sci-fi post-apocalyptic action RPG. But it's so much more than that. The whole concept of this broken-down futuristic factory setting is just awesome. It's gritty, industrial, and feels like everything is falling apart. which really adds to that sense of desperation as you're trying to survive. And honestly, the world building is better than I expected. You slowly uncover bits of the story as you explore, and the more you dig, the more you realize just how messed up everything is. Now, I've got to talk about the combat because that's really the star of the show here. It's tough, methodical, and every fight feels like it could be your last. But here's the twist that sets it apart: the whole targeting limbs mechanic. It's genius. You don't just hack and slash randomly. You're strategically aiming for enemy body parts. Want that awesome new arm gear? You better take it from your enemy. It makes every encounter feel like a high-stakes chess match, where you're constantly weighing the risk of going for the kill or trying to grab new loot. And the exosuit? Such a cool feature. It feels like you're wearing this clunky, powerful piece of machinery, and as you upgrade it, you can feel yourself getting stronger. But at the same time, the enemies ramp up in difficulty, so you're never too comfortable. It keeps you on your toes, for sure. Plus, the suit customization adds a ton of variety to the gameplay. So, yeah, the Surge is a gem. Next we have Ghost Recon Breakpoint. Ubisoft had a pretty solid reputation with the previous game, Ghost Recon Wildlands, so expectations were high for this one. But when Breakpoint dropped, it was met with a ton of criticism. People were upset with everything, from the bugs and glitches to the live service elements and microtransactions. Some felt the game had drifted too far from what made the Ghost Recon series great: tactical, squad-based military action. A lot of the backlash was around the game's focus on looter-shooter mechanics. Fans of the series weren't too happy about the addition of gear scores and loot systems, which felt more like something out of the Division rather than a tactical military shooter. That shift towards a more RPG-like system was jarring for longtime fans, and many felt it took away from the realism and immersion they loved about the franchise. Another big complaint was the lack of AI teammates at launch, which had been a staple in past Ghost Recon games. Instead, you were forced to play solo or with real players in co-op, and that left some players feeling like the experience was incomplete. But here's the thing: Ubisoft listened to the feedback. Over time, they patched the game, added new features, and really worked to improve the overall experience. AI teammates were eventually brought back, and many of the issues with bugs and balance were addressed. The game today is a much better, more polished version than it was at launch. Despite the rough start, Breakpoint offers a lot for fans of tactical shooters. It's a solid game that's way better than people give it credit for. Next we have No Man's Sky, one of the most controversial video game redemption stories out there. When this game first launched, it got slammed hard, like really hard. People were furious because they felt like they were promised the universe, literally, and what they got didn't live up to all the hype. You know how it is when a game gets hyped beyond belief, right? Expectations just go through the roof. The biggest issues at launch were things like missing features, limited multiplayer options, and overall a lack of the promised living, breathing universe that players thought they'd get. It was a huge deal at the time. Everyone was like, where are the massive space battles? Where's all the depth? Players felt misled, and it led to some pretty angry reviews. No Man's Sky became the poster child for overpromised and underdelivered games. But here's the crazy part. Instead of throwing in the towel, the developers at Hello Games just kept working on it. They didn't give up. And over time, they transformed the game into something truly special. Seriously, the updates have been absolutely massive. They kept adding the features players were hoping for, like base building, expanded multiplayer, better exploration mechanics, and more dynamic planets. Now, it's packed with content, and it's a totally different experience from what people saw at launch. It's honestly one of the most positive turnarounds in gaming. It went from being the game everyone loved to hate, to becoming a beloved space exploration game with a really dedicated fanbase. These days, it's praised for its vast, procedurally generated universe. Next we have Alien Isolation. I don't think I've ever played a game that kept me on the edge of my seat like this one did. You know how some horror games throw constant jump scares at you? Not here. This one's all about that slow building tension. You're literally never safe. It captures that feeling of dread from the original Alien movie perfectly. And let me tell you, the atmosphere in this game is top tier. The space station is so incredibly detailed, like straight out of the 1970s vision of the future. It has that grimy, lived-in feel, which just adds to how isolated you feel. The lighting is phenomenal too. I remember creeping through these dimly lit corridors with shadows dancing everywhere. The vibe is so good, you just feel like you're there. And that's half the reason this game works so well. It makes you feel like you're in constant danger. I think one of the coolest things is that the xenomorph isn't the only thing you have to worry about. There's other stuff happening on the station, and it really creates this sense that the world is alive. Well, maybe not alive, but dangerous. I won't spoil anything, but let's just say, some of the other encounters are almost as tense as dealing with the alien itself. Alien isolation isn't for everyone. If you don't like slower-paced games or being super stressed the whole time, maybe it's not your thing. But if you're someone who loves a good atmospheric challenge, and you appreciate a game that doesn't treat you like a kid, you're in for a treat. There's something incredibly satisfying about surviving an encounter with the alien, where you're just like, oh man, I actually made it through that. Honestly, the game is just a love letter to Alien fans.